It's affected more than 13 million people, including millions displaced and nearly 7,000 dead or missing. We're talking about Typhoon Haiyan, which hit the central Philippines on November 8th.
VOA Correspondent Steve Herman was in the Philippines covering the disaster, and he joins us now to talk about what he saw. Steve, thank you for being on the show. Take us back to the beginning. After you arrived in the Philippines, that first moment when you stepped out, how would you describe the level of destruction?
Well, when we first arrived, we really had no accurate means to describe the level of destruction. That was only possible with some accuracy when we were able, days later, to get in a U.S. military Seahawk helicopter and fly over at low altitude, both Leyte and Samar Islands. And that's when we saw that there were not only cities such as Tacloban that had suffered near total destruction, but likely hundreds of smaller towns and villages.
Steve, how do you or any other reporter for that matter, how does one cover a disaster of such magnitude?
Well, it's sheer tenacity and a lot of luck. In this case, the logistics were a huge challenge. The only sensible way to get to the worst hit areas quickly was on these U.S. military flights. And we were initially told that we could only carry what we could hold on our laps, and that while the military could give us an airlift in, there was no guarantee we could get a ride out. And considering that Tacloban and other areas we were going to or wanted to go to did not have any food, drinking water, ground transportation, or electricity, it was pretty daunting.
Steve, you talk about challenges for reporters in a situation like this, but there were also challenges getting humanitarian aid into the country. Tell us about that.
Well, I think there was sort of a stunned inaction initially because communications were cut off to Tacloban and the other hardest hit communities. So nobody really had an initial sense of just how bad this was. And then the real problem wasn't really getting into the Philippines or getting the aid into the Philippines, but getting it into the worst hit areas. There were these choke points at sea and airports, and there just weren't enough personnel to handle the significant influx which is still coming in. A lot of policemen were killed. The military wasn't in place. The Philippines military, except for the Army, has very few assets when it comes to its Navy and Air Force. Only has 2 or 3 working C-130 cargo planes. Tacloban Airport itself was severely damaged, and for some time it could only operate during daylight hours. And for a while there was even talk that there would need to be an amphibious landing by U.S. Marines on Leyte and Samar to get help in.
If you could quickly tell us in 10 seconds, there was an emergency radio station that was set up because everything was shut down in Tacloban. What happened?
Well, they had a portable studio and transmitter that fit in 2 small suitcases that had been poised in Manila, and they were able to fly this in 72 hours after the disaster hit and get this up and running.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, VOA Correspondent Steve Herman.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. We really appreciate all your hard work and your reporting there in the Philippines.